reach me for any reason, I'm at C. Backman at BU. I'm in the history department. Just note that it's Backman with a K. I'm Swedish, not German.
We forgive you.
Let's see. Yeah, I teach a course on the Crusades. It's actually my most popular course. I'm doing it this semester, in fact. We normally get, well, we cap it at 80 students, but depending on what's happening over in that part of the world, we can easily draw more. But I cap it at 80 because that's all the number of papers I can stand to grade. There just isn't time for any more. And if I had known that I was going to be filming this, I'd done something about it here. Like you, I'm at that stage where, it's spring break next week and it's just a mountain of laundry at home. I thought, well, I could actually, should I go out and buy a new pair of pants or something? No. This will be fun. Yeah, the issue of the Crusades is one that's very central to my work. Not so much the Crusades themselves as simply the relationship between Christians and Muslims and Jews throughout the Middle Ages. And in fact, I recently have finished, we're now sending through the press, a book that I've finished on the entire history of Western and Middle Eastern relations. It's 1,300 pages. I had no idea until I just started to hit the print button, and they just kept coming and coming and coming. The Crusades, they both are and aren't really exceptional. What makes them exceptional and what attracts students to the course is they are the only conflicts in our history, since Western Europe became predominantly Christianized. They're the only wars that the religious culture itself positively advocated, not simply defended as morally justifiable. Say, for example, as with the fight against the Nazis or something like that, which is morally justifiable. But here we have something where the church was actively promoting the war, promoting the idea that God and Christ want you to go and kill Muslims. That's what makes them exceptional. What makes them unexceptional is the fact that they are simply one more chapter in a much, much bigger war that has always taken place in this part of the world. After all, I knew this would someday happen to me. Someone's going to actually get a film of one of my drawings. I'm terribly bad at drawing, as some of you know. But if we take a map of Europe, this is as good as they ever get. I may have to point out, this is Scandinavia, here's France and Germany and Italy and Greece, and here's the Holy Land down here. Is that in the ancient world, if you think back to the Roman period with Mare Nostrum, our sea, and the Greeks, and going back earlier to the Phoenicians, things like that. On the one hand, the Mediterranean basin, one can think of it as a vast macro economy. This is a territory where, because of the ease of sailing in the Mediterranean, right, there are no tides. The seas are large enough to have high tide, low tide, so you can sail 24/7. And it's fairly quiet. These are very placid waters because the storms can't get in through the Straits of Gibraltar. And because the place is pockmarked with so many islands, that with one exception, which is an area down here in the Bay of Sidra, which is just north of where today's Libya is, with the exception of this one zone, anywhere you go on the surface of the Mediterranean, you can always see land. And so navigation is remarkably easy. In the ancient and medieval worlds, the sailors in the Mediterranean were like Boston drivers, in the sense that they navigated by landmarks, rather than they didn't navigate by the stars. And so since communication and transportation were so easy in the Mediterranean. This has been, for all of the multiplicity of cultures that have lived around the basin, this has always been one kind of large macro economy. At the same time, if you turn over to the Asian continent, well, obviously we have lots of separate and regional zones, but in terms of the great caravan route, or what's called the caravan route, or the spice route, or the silk route, right? That there is also a kind of macro economy that extends all the way from China across through India and down into reaching the Mediterranean. That this too is within limits, within certain conceptual limits. One can also think of Asia, in terms of, at least in terms of its international trade, as a kind of macro economy. And this territory here, the territory that ultimately becomes the Holy Land, is valuable long before it becomes holy. It's valuable because it is the overlap between two macro economies. The territory itself is not particularly rich in terms of natural resources or anything like that, but its mere placement as the connecting point between two macro economies means that it has been fought over for millennia now. If we think of Western history in terms of its written component, of Western written history, well, it begins, say, with the Persian War fighting against the Greeks, right? And then the Greeks coming back under Alexander the Great and fighting against the Persians. Later on, it's a group like the Sassanids fighting against the Romans, right? And then ultimately we then have the Muslims coming up out of Arabia and seizing this part of the world. And then it's fought over between the Crusaders and the Byzantines and the Muslims, and then the Ottoman Turks come in ultimately. This has been a region that people have been fighting for, because if one can control this relatively poor piece of land, it's like controlling the taps that empty into two big, wealthy basins. And so you make your money by controlling this region and therefore controlling the trade back and forth. So the Crusades, in one sense, there's nothing remarkable about them at all. It's just one more of the endless battles that are fought between the European-based world and the Asia-based world for control of this strategically vital territory. Now, obviously, in the modern world now, it no longer has that particular significance. But the infrastructure, the historical infrastructure, is there long before the Crusades. And one sees both the exceptional nature of the Crusades and the unexceptional nature of the Crusades expressed in the writings of the time. There were individuals who regarded this as the most extraordinary phenomena of the age. Actually, the majority of opinions in that nature come out of the Christian world of medieval Europe, the knights and kings and castles and fiefs, that sort of thing. The bulk of the reaction within the Islamic world is a bit more bifurcated. What one finds is that in the 11th and 12th and 13th century contemporary sources, what happened here when the Crusaders came mattered very much to the people who lived in this region. But if you read the writings that come from Arabic or from Islamic North Africa or Islamic Spain, or if you head east to Baghdad and head over into the Persian-speaking regions, the Crusades don't even register on the radar screen. Whenever they are mentioned, they're referred to as a frontier skirmish. Just another case of the people from the West fighting to control this piece of land. It's not regarded as a happy occurrence that the Holy Land has been taken by the Christians, but it's not regarded as an enormous crime upon Islam itself. So we see both attitudes, and we see both attitudes even playing themselves out down to today. Right? It's interesting that part of Arabic or part of Islamic culture, they've had from the very beginning a very, very long tradition of historical writing. We're very rich in our collections of Arab chronicles, or Arabic language chronicles. Few of them talk about the Crusades at any length. Again, with the exception of the ones that are written from peoples within this territory. But if you go across to the far western reaches or far across to the far eastern reaches, the Crusades are scarcely mentioned. When they are mentioned, they're referred to as, the battles, in this particular province, and they certainly don't say very nice things about the Crusaders. But it's not regarded as a sort of enormous existential crime committed upon the Islamic people. Actually, the very first history of the Crusades, say an entire book-length history of the Crusades, to be written in Arabic, the first Arabic language history of the Crusades, didn't appear until 1892. Despite centuries of historical writing, much of it is being brilliant, the Crusades were never regarded as a topic that was significant enough to deserve an entire book, a book-length analysis or narrative. And ever since that first book appeared, now endless numbers of them have over the years, of course. But the phenomenon began, obviously, it's a response to 19th century European imperialism. So this part of the world, having come under the sway or under the domination now of imperial, 19th century imperial Europe, they now hearken back to the Crusades, which they tended to regard as simply the first link in this long chain. It's the first of Europe's great crimes against us. It's of Christian and Europe's determination to destroy Islam. So when they did start to pay attention to the Crusades, or any significant amount of attention to Crusades, they began to read it in to read the Crusades in apocalyptic terms. That needs to be done away with. But one has to be respectful in doing that. There's always the danger in rereading or attempting to reread terrible things from the past. There's always the danger of being of offending people, perhaps of making people feel that their culture's sufferings are being slighted. So it's a delicate task. This is one reason I spent so many pages on it.